Hello, welcome to today's broadcast. How's that microphone going? Let's see. Hope everybody's well. I'm broadcasting about the arrest of a Virginia man at a Washington checkpoint with 500 rounds of ammunition and some fake inauguration credentials and a loaded handgun. So that's concerning, but good that they stopped him. I know that the preparations for the inauguration in terms of National Guard and just general agency activation have been unprecedented. So I'm going to zoom out a tiny bit and go big picture. Hello, indoor smokers, and hello, Phil. I don't smoke, but I bought a packet of cigarettes, which is what I do when things get very tense once every few years for whatever reason, death of a parent or ongoing armed insurrection effort. I pretend to smoke, so I don't own a lighter, so just bear with me. This is like a prop at the moment. But yes, the more of these people they can arrest, the better, and the more instructive it is, because at the moment it looks like a critical force for change is coming from companies not wanting to sully their brand. So a sort of brand protective effort of companies saying, wow, we've crossed a line into Trumpism being involved with active efforts to overthrow the government, active, armed, violent insurrection. And that's not okay with them anymore. So the PGA tournament cancelling a golf tournament that Trump had long pushed for being held at his New Jersey golf property, no longer on. That's something that apparently has very much distressed him. And what else? Let's see. I'm just going back to have a little look at the details. Wow, McCarthy is facing backlash from the right, so for not being loyal enough to Trump. So there's a wedge situation happening in the Republican Party, which is, as Senator Rand Paul has suggested, a third of the party might abandon the Republican Party if impeachment is followed through with and voted on successfully in the Senate. So if Trump is convicted even after he leaves office, and therefore stripped of some of the perks of retirement as a president. Now, a wedged Republican Party is an important thing. It does look like there's going to be significant erosion, both from decent people who just didn't really pay attention to where the Republican Party was going or what it was that they were really doing, namely anti-democratic voter suppression of Black votes for decades, and then more recently, huge amounts of corruption, kleptocratic fascism involving lots and lots of deception and lots of symbiotically, mutually supportive propaganda networks like Fox, and then liars like Trump and his network of complicit Republican politicians to varying degrees. The good thing, as we note, it's never set in stone. There's always moments for people to find a conscience or find a motivation to not go along with fascism, to those Republican officials in Georgia who would not commit crimes to help prop up a theft of the election by Trump. Instead, they released to the public a phone call that showed Trump calling Republican officials in Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, the Georgian Secretary of State, to demand that 11,000 votes be found for him. And this is a very interesting development. It's a very tragic development for those family members of the people who died in the insurgency effort on the 6th of January. But there's a very high death toll already associated with the Trump administration, and that is the pandemic death toll. And, I haven't read the Washington Journal article, but I was looking at some graphs they generated yesterday, indicating that COVID deaths may be underestimated by approximately a quarter or more. So let's see, if we're getting close to 400,000 deaths by the end of the month, a quarter would be 100,000. So then say the true death tally of COVID in the United States might very well be 500,000 already. Okay. Oh, Rainbow League is up past her bedtime, or his bedtime. I can't remember. Yes, so that corporate money pushing pressure on Mitch McConnell might very well be powerful. That might help highlight that they need to draw a line under Trumpism and just wear the cost of a large proportion of the Republican base abandoning them for being insufficiently loyal to their deified God leader king person, Donald Trump. Yes, and the Georgian Attorney General and staff are considering charges against Donald Trump for the contents of that particular phone call that was released to the public by Brad Raffensperger, where they highlighted that it sounded like mob tactics with the intimidation and the heavy-handed hinting and then the outright demanding. But yes, a lot of corporations have got on board with withdrawing funds, or at least pausing funding the Republicans who were involved in failing to certify the results of the election. So I'm just going to have a quick look at this one point about Ted Cruz. It starts with Ted Cruz. It's from David Roberts, who runs a newsletter called Volts about clean energy and politics. He was originally called Dr. Vox, I believe, and might have been a founding member of the Vox media platform, which you might be familiar with, very informative. But I think they've split up there and gone their separate ways, those editors. So the point here is that there was an article about how Ted Cruz's former staffers report to journalists anonymously that they are disgusted by Cruz's new low for Trump. And that prompts David Roberts to share something. It's his take that says there's a long-standing mythology in political journalism that the best work comes from getting inside, getting sources that are close to the action. The idea is you're tapping into a sort of secret insider knowledge, the real deal, the stuff that matters. It applies to punditry as well. Supposedly you get the best insight from those on the inside, up close, who see the game and aren't fooled by whatever's presented to the hoi polloi, the masses. But David says, in my experience, it is often those deepest inside who are most prone to deceiving themselves, least likely to have good perspective on the changing landscape. See, for example, Democratic senators who still buy their Republican colleagues' cloakroom assurances that they want bipartisanship. Yes, so there are some instances in which you have a better perspective if you can step back and you're not intimately involved in the cloakroom assurances and the friendship. But the reason why people might be susceptible to that, it's a protection racket for meritocracy. And the type of meritocracy where you go to the elite institutions and then you make it into the rarefied elite circles, and then only then do you get the insider knowledge that reveals to you the true nature of things. And people on the outside of that, the very far outside, who feel dismissed as little plebs who don't have that special insider knowledge, cultivated from attendance at Yale and Harvard and then acceptance into internship positions that you can only afford to occupy if you have wealthy parents who will support you whilst you don't have the time or the leisure to work to support yourself. So that kind of promotes access journalism, doesn't it? The idea that you just need the inside information. It promotes overconsumption of news because people will just hang on for these updates for people who understand the secret workings of politics. Whereas from the outside, you can have people as far away as Australia have a look at what's happening and say, Republicans are exploiting the gullibility of their followers. And there's an ecosystem that is amplifying that deception. And so it doesn't matter if you're friends with Republican senators, the general thrust of their world revolves around gratifying their wealthy donors and feeding into a culture war, a perceived culture war for the relatively less wealthy, the aspirationally wealthy. I am loving, beautiful point, League of Rainbows. The closer you are, the more your cognitive biases can kick in because of your tribalistic leanings. So Ted Cruz's staff feel that they're part of Ted Cruz's team, and therefore everybody else is not surprised that Ted Cruz turns out to be an unprincipled traitor because they've seen how prepared he has been to overlook a president who called his wife ugly and slandered his father as being involved in the JFK assassination. But people working for Ted Cruz have this whole well-supported internal structure of rationales and justifications and rationalizations of how great Ted Cruz is, and therefore reality smacks them more sharply across the face when they realize that Ted Cruz supported a large-scale assassination attempt on Congress when the Capitol was overrun and invaded by a bunch of Trump supporters, inflamed Trump supporters, and who may have been acting on more of a short-term premise, and the longer-term paramilitary groups who've been planning to try and overthrow the government for a while. It's just, a pet weekend project they've been training for. The trick is to broaden your input from all sources. True, to have a varied media diet and not to get addicted on a narrow frame of reference and a narrow point of view, but to entertain many different points of view as possibly having some truth to them and being worthy of consideration. Because even points of view that we hate can still sometimes yield a glimmer of insight. And it's worth it to try and understand perspectives from different angles and different groups of people. They may have merit, but it takes a degree of strength to sustain that diversity of news sources, but still retaining a strong personal identity. You don't have to rely on a tribe necessarily, but you can believe in the principle of seeking truth and avoiding a tribalistic circumscription of your own understanding, i.e. identifying yourself so strongly with a party or your position. I'm a Ted Cruz staffer, that you can't see the bigger picture anymore. Phil's got some nice updates. Yes, Cruz's presidential hopes are shot, so is Hawley's. And you might have said, no, but maybe those Trump supporters are so powerful. They're not that powerful. Those people needed a wake-up call, and COVID was a wake-up call to some, and the armed insurrection has been a wake-up call to some others. So that core group of Trump lovers, whilst surprisingly enduring, not that surprising if you understand how fascism works as an emotional conditioning strategy that zombifies large segments of the population. That large zombified segment of Trump supporters has still had some peering off around the edges from COVID and now from the insurrection, so that people are changing their party registration away from Republican at a very elevated rate. And companies are certainly reinforcing that truth is truth and that armed insurrection is bad, even as Republicans would still like to push it as much as they can and pretend that the armed insurrection isn't worth talking about. Instead, the greatest travesty of the hour is that some Trump supporters have been kicked off Twitter for circulating, for planning violence and circulating propaganda that contributes to violence and contributed to an armed insurrection attempt. And yes, Lowe's Resort cancelled Hawley's fundraiser. It's very promising, isn't it? Well, I'm glad to talk to you guys whilst you're feeling upbeat about certain elements, because all I need is for America to get through the inauguration safely, and then for various agencies to be vigilant in continuing with the pattern of arrests and charging people with serious crimes if they participated in a violent overthrow of the Capitol in order to change the results of a certified election. Yeah, Trent's a little bit of a troll, and you can engage with him if you like. But yeah, I do like getting my moderators to mute Trent if he's becoming too much of a distraction, because we don't owe you our time and attention, Trent, and that's just a fact of life. And what are your objections, Trent? What do you think is the objection to Nikki Haley? I mean, I find her cover-up of Khashoggi's torture and murder to be one of the more unconscionable things she's done. But similarly with her failure to champion Palestinian human rights at all, that to me is a concern. And her articulation of the falsity that Jared Kushner is a genius, when Jared Kushner is one of the most dangerous men in American history to ever affiliate themselves with the halls of power. Kristi Noem's responsible for a lot of dead people in South Dakota. You might not recognize this, but it's true. And so is Ron DeSantis, involved in cover-ups, an armed effort to arrest Rebecca Jones, fabrication of charges against her. That's the data scientist who helped compile and construct Florida's original website showing COVID cases. But when Rebecca Jones was asked to falsify some data and wouldn't, she was summarily dismissed from her position and instead started up her own website from home in an effort to keep tabs on infections in various Florida counties, as well as infections and closures of schools. True. Trump supporters hate Republicans who from their perspective, are inadequately supportive of Trump, even more than they hate Democrats, because fascists always need a narrative of betrayal. So they don't expect good things from Democrats. I mean, yes, they'll call them communists and try and kill them if they find them in the halls of a Capitol building. But that real potent additional level of violent anger is directed at Republicans, which is why Republican congressmen members who voted for impeachment of Donald Trump are investing in body armor. And yes, it's online social media traffic in relation to plotting further violence has been curtailed by the shutting down of Parler and the kicking off so many MAGA accounts, QAnon accounts from Twitter. And it was also pointed out to me that we needn't celebrate Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, as some kind of hero. They waited until people had died from propaganda-related violence. And maybe they realized they had legal exposure if there was any further violence. I was told they don't lean blue, they don't lean red, they lean green, i.e. they're primarily motivated by money and increasing their market share and their market dominance, etc. (2022) Let's survive 2021 first, but 2022, I hear you. I'm not as worried because there's so many reasons why the Republican Party is splintering and fraying. And so even if it's just fraying 20% of people losing faith in the Republican Party, and some of those people are losing faith because they reject the idea of armed insurrection, or some people are losing faith in the Republican Party because they wanted the armed insurrection to work, and they're angry that not more Republicans helped overturn the certification process of the election results. I can handle an opposing viewpoint, Trent, which is why you're still here for now. It's just a fact of like. Do you like this broadcast, Trent? Is that why you're still here? Or is it because you feel incredibly committed to schooling me on how Trump's going to win the election still. Because I seem to remember you coming here before saying, just wait for January the 6th. Of course, now we know that a lot of people who said that were saying so with a wink and a nudge, because they had every intention of going to the Capitol and seeking to prevent or delay the certification of Biden's victory by fomenting armed insurrection. Yeah, I don't know about Haley's appeal. And certainly a lot of people in the Republican Party are very warmongerish. So we can find points of agreement. Somebody called Chris says hello. Hello to you. All right. I think I'm going to go watch a movie with my daughter. Luckily, the coup attempt was just as incompetent as Trump. I think more we were just lucky in general. We were lucky Officer Eugene Goodman was able to direct the attention of the ingressing mob and draw them up the stairs away from the corridor to the Senate. And we were just lucky. We were just lucky people managed to delay. We were lucky that the FBI detained some people before they could join the riot. So that Proud Boys founder, Enrico Torres, who was detained with a couple of magazines capable of holding a lot of ammunition. Yes, they're all jockeying for position for 2024. And Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley jockeyed so hard that they jockeyed themselves right off the platform. Thanks, Phil. I'm glad you enjoyed hearing from me. I find it stressful. I'm looking forward to the inauguration being safely over. I'm sad that they stripped some of the joy from us for celebrating the historic victory of Kamala Harris. Oh, and her inspiring quote for the day, because she made one, is from Shirley Chisholm. So Kamala Harris posted a quote from Shirley Chisholm, who was a Black female legislator some time ago. She said, "Today I'm thinking about her inspirational words. I am and always will be a catalyst for change." Nice. Oh, and one last one. Giuliani says he is working on Trump's impeachment defense and tells me he would argue that Trump's voter fraud claims are true, and therefore, if you can prove that it's true, they're no longer fighting words. He just wants to gravitate towards any possible second that he can spend telling the press that the voting claims are true in order to further incite violence, to further zombify those people who may have been querying. They're hearing Rudy say he's putting it all on the line to defend Trump with an argument that it's true, that calling somebody a prostitute wasn't slander if she really is a prostitute. Oh, Phil's going to send me a historic speech from 1857. Thank you. The Mud Sill speech. I look forward to it. Am I familiar with Tim Wise? Yes, that name's familiar. He had a great Twitter thread today about white supremacy. All right, I'll have a quick look. Tim Wise. Tim says he should be prosecuted for destroying documents. That's Trump, yes. No need to even know what they were. Destruction of them alone is criminal. Just one more reason to lock him up and anyone else who destroys documents for him. Yes, I think I'd seen his thread before about working to oppose David Duke. So in 1989, Tim writes, when David Duke won the state House seat in Louisiana, Some of us said this was an inflection point in American politics. This wasn't just the logical result of Reagan-esque racial dog whistling. It was something different. It wasn't even George Wallace, strictly speaking, although it was closer to that than Reagan. It was the blatant introduction of racist appeals under the guise of mainstream conservatism, without the polish. Oh, and with the addition of the polish and the media savvy that Wallace lacked, as had most previous white supremacists. So David Duke knew how to use media. He'd cut 30-minute infomercials in his Senate run in 1990 to slowly lay out his politics of racial resentment, knowing that it would find a home with white folks angered by previous GOP scapegoating of welfare, etc. So with Republicans primed by being told that there was such thing as welfare queens, that there would be more room for David Duke to further catalyze racism. So David Duke lost in 1990, but he got 60% of the white vote. I want to reiterate that 6 in every 10 white people in Louisiana voted for someone they all knew was a white supremacist, indeed a Nazi. At the time, folks outside of Louisiana told us, that's just LA. At the time when David Duke lost the governor's race, people were even more convinced David Duke was done and the politics he represented was done. They also insisted he was a geographically specific phenomenon that wouldn't work elsewhere, which plays to extremism. But as my boss at the Louisiana Coalition, which was the group that was formed to stop Duke, said, Dukeism was cocaine politics, addictive, deadly, and easily transported across state lines. But folks didn't want to believe it. They wanted to believe that Louisiana and the South were just different. There you go. I'm going to read that some more later. We have heard rumors that Trump has asked his aides not to pay Giuliani. All right. So thank you for sharing that Tim Wise thread with me. I think it's very useful and good. And take care, everyone. I hope to talk to you again soon. Feel free to send me interesting speeches or articles. I dropped my watch. And just, it's given me some clarity today on what I am doing, the Dr. Volt's thread I read earlier, that I'm giving an amateur contribution to politics to undermine anybody's conviction that Washington reporting has to be elite, has to be insider knowledge. Sometimes you can get a better picture looking in from the outside and looking at the bigger historical tides. Thanks, Rainbow League. All the best. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.